Some people take, some people get took. And they know they're getting took, and there's nothing they can do about it. Welcome to the Your Pick Movie Podcast. I'm Geneva.
And I'm Tatum.
We're two friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. Today on the show, we will be discussing the 1960 film The Apartment, directed by Billy Wilder and starring Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, and Fred MacMurray. So, to start with, Tatum, what is your relationship to The Apartment? Had you seen it before? And what were your thoughts on this rewatch?
So, I had seen this movie once before, a few years back, maybe 3 or 4 years. And as Geneva knows, we talked about this a few years ago, and I was not the biggest fan of this movie at the time. It wasn't that I hated it. It wasn't that I thought it was a bad movie. It just was not something that particularly caught my interest. And before everybody comes after me, I just want to say, because I know that's an unpopular opinion. No, I didn't like it the first time around, but I am a big Billy Wilder fan. I like Some Like It Hot. I really love Sunset Boulevard. I'm a fan of Sabrina. So I am a Billy Wilder fan. I admire his craft and his stories and all of those things. So I just want to get that out of the way so people don't hate me.
This is a safe space. I admitted to not liking Holy Grail very much last week, the first time I watched it.
Yeah, so the first time I watched it, I was not a huge fan. This time around, I also am pretty lukewarm on it. I have to be honest.
All right.
Yeah, the first half of the film, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm just bored in the first half of the movie. The story doesn't capture my interest the first half of it. I was kind of like, okay, can we move along? I don't really care about anything that's happening. And then the second half of it, I did appreciate more. I did like the relationship between Fran and, I always forget the characters' names because they call everyone by their last name and they're all really complicated in my opinion. But Fran and the main guy, who Baxter. I don't even think I know what is Baxter. Yes. I did come to appreciate their relationship in the second half. But I do think that this time around, I was able to pinpoint why I don't appreciate the movie as much as other people. Because the first time I didn't really know why. This time, I think it's because so for me, I'm very sensitive when it comes to portrayals of women in TV shows and movies and and how they're treated. I'm very sensitive to those things. And I think in the first half of this movie, there is a lot of women are being portrayed as being stupid and oh, I'm just this drunk lady at a bar. You're kind of cute. Hey. And then the men don't treat them well. There's men slapping women on the butt like they're objects and talking about them like they're stupid. Men just treating their mistresses like trash. So it's really hard for me to get into stories like that. And especially when it's treated kind of, I don't know, for me, it comes across as kind of maybe trying to be portrayed as a comedy, and I don't really find it funny. So yeah, I think it was just hard for me to see women portrayed in that kind of light as A, they're kind of stupid, B, they're sexual objects, and then 3, the men kind of, or A, B, and C, the men kind of just not treating them well, and the men being assholes, in my opinion. And I don't think the movie shies away from that. I think it does acknowledge that the men are assholes, but all the same, it's hard for me to kind of watch that. So when the second half is a little bit more for lack of a better word, humane. It's just between Fran and Baxter, and it's just the two of them for the most part. Um, I don't know. I feel like you start to see human beings as opposed to just objects walking around that are just being sexist and stupid and annoying. So, yeah, just to circle back to what I said before, I don't hate this film. I don't think it's a bad movie. I admire the craft of it. There's some shots in here that I think are beautiful. I really like the acting performances and the costumes, and yeah, it's a very well made film. Just for me, I'm very lukewarm on it because of everything that I just said. So yeah.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. And it's funny, as you're saying these things, and this, well, I should say, obviously I picked this movie. I like this movie. I won't say that this is one of the sort of, top 10 most meaningful movies to me in terms of something that I've returned to many times over the years. I've probably only seen it 2 or 3 times prior to this. But it's just one where I really, really admire the craft, and returning to it this time, after not having seen it for a few years, I was really just bowled over by how relevant it is, in my opinion, to the 21st century in so many ways. And I, I mean, I'm a huge Billy Wilder fan. I definitely have not seen, nearly all of his um, have not seen his entire filmography. There are many blind spots that I have, but every one of his films that I've seen, I loved. And I love, in particular, about him the way he can dabble in so many different genres. I really admire directors that can do that. I think he just has a fantastic control of tone. And basically, everything that you're saying about this movie, about the turn that it takes from this sort of more comedic, lighthearted, but in a way that's very uncomfortable first half, where women are kind of viewed through this lens of, as this more objectifying lens, toward the second half, where all of a sudden those consequences start coming into play. That's 100% intentional, in my opinion. Well, I shouldn't say in my opinion. Pretty sure I'm right. And I think that Billy Wilder just does
I
it
would
so.
agree with that, by the
Yeah.
way. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I think Billy Wilder just does it so fantastically. I think the transformation that Baxter undergoes, where he is, you know, hobnobbing with the executives, and he's borrowing their phrases and their languages, their phrases and their the excuses that they make. He'll multiple times, one of them will say something about the way they interact with women, and then Baxter himself repeats it, and usually in a context where it's like, what are you talking about? Why are you saying that? That's horrible. Um, um, yeah, it's so pointed, I think, in the fact that it is Baxter realizing that this sort of male dominated, corporatized, capitalistic, seeing people as objects and tools in a machine to be exploited and manipulated, that sort of lifestyle has real consequences. There's human detritus that comes along, because of that, in the person of Fran. And then in the second half is where he grows up, essentially, and he finally learns how to stand up for himself. He learns how to really take on, values and integrity, and say, no, I'm going to be seeing people as other people as human. I'm going to be treating women as human. I'm going to be refusing to be a part of this system that just chews people up and spits them out and has no regard for the women who might be hurt along the way. So yeah, all that is to say is, I really do love this movie. I think the craft is immaculate. As you said, the acting is wonderful. Jack Lemmon is, he's fantastic. The way he can shuffle between comedy and drama is wonderful. But just in particular, Shirley MacLaine. I mean, what a star-making performance this is. She's just absolutely everything in this movie. And Fred MacMurray, it's so funny seeing that sort of, affable Disney dad that he played so often. He when he weaponizes that and turns in a villain role like he does in Double Indemnity. He's always so good. So anyway, yeah, all that is to say is I really, really like this movie. I totally understand why it can be very difficult to see these things portrayed on screen, and different tastes are all legitimate. But it's just one that's very meaningful to me, and I think has a lot to speak into today's culture.
And I can see that. I can see how it's meaningful. I can see how it speaks into today's culture. I see all of those things. I think just because it touches on a subject matter that for me in particular is difficult to watch, it just makes it harder for me. But I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. It's just for me because it's within that realm of things, it's harder for me to stay focused for a long time because I just think to myself, why do I want to keep watching this? I'm not enjoying watching people act like this and behave like this and treat other people like this. So, yeah, I think that transformation and that shift in the second half is very meaningful, and I think that there is a lesson to be learned there, and it's done well. Um, it's difficult for me at times. So yeah,
Yeah. Yep. Totally,
and
totally
also,
understand and respect it.
and I would like to shout out. I think before when I was listing Billy Wilder movies that I liked, I forgot to say Double Indemnity. I absolutely love that film as well. So
Double
yeah,
Indemnity
I'm
rules.
I'm a big Billy Wilder fan. I am a Billy Wilder fan.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, one note that I took down while I was watching this movie is maybe this is just my brain that wants to make connections with things, but I feel like this movie is kind of a culmination of the Billy Wilder cinematic universe in many ways, where um, you have Fred McMurray playing a selfish insurance related person, as in Double Indemnity. You have a husband who is looks to begin an affair while his wife and children are away for the summer, which is the 7 Year Itch. You have a woman who looks like Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe obviously was in two movies that Billy Wilder had previously made. You also have a reference to A Lost Weekend, which is a Billy Wilder film. Anyway, yeah, just my brain making connections.
Geneva's a nerd, you guys.
In case you haven't realized it yet.
Love it.
All right. Well, should we get into the plot a little bit?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, let's do it. Okay. So we open, it's New York of the late 50s, early 60s, kind of Mad Men era. Cece Baxter, who is played by Jack Lemmon, is a lowly office drone trying to climb the ladder at a huge insurance company. It's a mechanized, corporatized atmosphere, and the only source of joy in his daily routine is his interactions with Fran Kubelik, played by Shirley MacLaine, who is a charming but mysterious elevator girl, and Baxter has a big crush on her. In the evenings, Baxter loans out the key to his apartment to several managers at his company as a place where they can go to take their mistresses so they don't have to pay for a hotel or a motel. This state of affairs is pretty miserable for Baxter. When the movie opens, one manager has overstayed his time, and he keeps Baxter wandering around on a rainy night until almost 9 o'clock. Baxter gets home, starts having a lowly TV dinner, goes to bed, and then only a couple hours later, he's dragged out of bed again because another manager has met a woman at the bar who, quote, looks like Marilyn Monroe. And she's also doing a pretty decent Marilyn Monroe vocal impression, too, by the way. So, to make matters worse, Baxter's neighbors are all disgusted with him. They don't realize that the sounds of, people partying and doing other things in his apartment are not Baxter. They think that he's just this absolute ladies' man, and he's just going out and picking up women at bars and bringing a different woman home every night. So, yeah, they're all just really disturbed by his behavior. Um, just in this opening part, I mean, Tatum, you mentioned the cinematography before. The way that the office is depicted with the rows and rows and rows of desks with the exact same machinery, people doing things at the same time. The Baxter's voiceover where he discusses how I think the workday starts at 8:50 and ends at 5:20, and so that they can control the flow of people in and out. It's just this absolute, the corporation as this giant machine, and all the human beings are just cogs in the machine. There's this lifelessness to it. Baxter comes home and he sits down and he makes his TV dinner. It's just this very sort of isolating and very mechanized existence. That is one thing that just immediately struck me as being very relevant and understandable in our day. The technologies have changed, but that sort of attitude, I think, has not. I don't know. What did you think about this opening?
Yeah, I thought that it did a good job of just setting the stage and letting you know who this Baxter character is, but also how he relates to this world around him, and what his goals are and what his motivations are, which I think is really cool. Yeah, I mean, I wrote down a few things. You kind of touched on the scenes in which these happened, so I can just kind of mention them real quick. But I just noted how that typing office, or whatever you call it,
Mm-hmm.
is huge. That is so so big. I'm assuming that's a real office and that's all real background and everything. Like, I just can't even imagine. Also, Baxter's character says that he makes $947 a week. I'm pretty sure that's like a lot of money, right? If we were to adjust for inflation nowadays, that's probably a lot, right?
Are you sure that was per week?
uh, I'm pretty sure the quote was per week.
Yeah, you're
I mean,
you're
I'd have to go
probably right.
back and
All I
I'd have to
remember
go
is that
back and
his
rewatch it.
all I remember is that his rent was $85 a month.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying, because I feel like that adds an interesting, I mean, even, yeah, I just feel like that adds an interesting dynamic of, if it is $947 a week, which adjusted to whatever that would be now, would be a lot of money. I think that makes it interesting as to why he's still wanting to climb this ladder and get higher up in the company when he's already pretty well off. So I thought that was just an interesting question, and adding a little bit more depth to his character. Um, and then I wrote down that I thought that it was super relatable how, when he goes home and he's watching TV with his TV dinner and stuff, he also hates ads in the middle of his watching process as much as we do, because there's these clips of him just flipping through the channels and he's like, I'll go back to what I was watching before. And then there's an ad and he's like, forget it. So I thought that was relatable to now.
By
And
the
then
way,
just,
sorry, just
yeah.
I was just looking it up while you were talking. He
Hmm.
makes 94.70, not 974. Yeah.
Oh,
So according
that makes
to
more
yes,
sense.
according to IMDb, in 2014, that worked out to about $40,000 a year. So it's a
Okay.
kind of, yeah, it's a not great, it's a livable but not great salary.
Okay. Yeah, that's very different from
Yeah.
$947 a week.
I was like, that doesn't sound
Um,
right.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was
Yes,
a
no
good fact
problem.
check.
But
Um,
continue with your point.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just a few more comments. I thought it was funny how, when he's like at home watching the TV, and then he gets the phone call from the guy asking him to leave his apartment, and he's like, I'm already home. I want to go to sleep. And then the guy on the other
Very
side, he
relatable.
says, it's only 11 p.m. And my thought is, I mean, maybe this is just me being old, but I'm just thinking, 11 p.m. on a weeknight? Are you kidding me? That's freaking late, dude. Like,
Like,
leave
why
me
is
in
that
peace. I
manager
need to
even
go to
out in the
bed.
bar trying to pick up a woman? Like,
I think that that's a legitimate question. Yes, and then the last that I have for this opening section is, I think I said before that I really admire the cinematography in this movie. I think for me, the most impactful shot out of the whole movie comes out of this scene when, I think the man and his mistress or whatever, they're showing up at the apartment after Baxter has like vacated it for them to go in and go up. And there's this whole thing of Baxter is down the stairs on a lower level, farther away from the camera.
mm,
And then the couple, they're walking right in front of the camera. And then they go up the stairs and they're in focus and they go inside. And then it racks focus to Baxter. I just thought that that shot was really, really beautiful and also telling a lot of Baxter's character, especially in the first half of the movie. You know, he's got his hat and he's looking down, and his coat that's a dark color, and he's looking at his feet. And yeah, I just really, really liked that shot a lot. I thought it was beautiful, and it seemed very well thought through, and I thought it communicated a lot about the story and his character. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, can we give props to the production designer of the apartment itself? Because that place is, it's sort of simultaneously so perfect for kind of a lonely bachelor. It's a little bit cramped, it's a little bit messy. It's clearly in, I think they say it's in kind of the Upper West Side part of New York. And, you look at it, you look at that gorgeous wood paneling and decorative work, and you're like, that thing would be worth like $2 million at least today. um, that thing is so gorgeous, but you can also tell that it's a bit older, it's a bit shabbier. It's all his neighbors seem to be kind of maybe sort of ethnic, sort of immigrant community that he's living in. It's very much a sort of lower working class neighborhood that he's in, and yeah, that apartment just communicates it all so beautifully. It's so beautifully staged for the compositions, the way the bedroom is in the background and the doorway is in the foreground, and so he can have people coming in while things are going on in the bedroom or in the kitchen. Yeah, it's just beautifully, beautifully designed. And yeah, so I was trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to say about the opening. Oh, sorry, you mentioned the scene where he sits down to watch TV. That scene absolutely cracked me up because he's sitting down to watch this classy movie. It's full of stars. It's Greta Garbo. It's John Gilbert. It's this movie that was, I believe, Grand Hotel, I believe, was a Best Picture winner back in the 30s. But
Didn't it
before
say
you had,
Joan? Didn't it say Joan
I
Crawford
think
too?
so, yeah, Joan Crawford. Like all the big stars of that sort of, would have been 30 years prior to this movie, 20 to 30 years prior to this movie being made. I think it says something, maybe it's based on a book or something like that. But before you can get to this, actual bit of, uh, you know, legitimate, classy entertainment, you have to get through all of these commercials. And then he tries to flip the channel, and everything on the other channels is just violence. It's all people shooting each other and punching each other. And I was just like, well, things have not changed at all.
Nope. Like I said, relatable.
Relatable. All right. Um, So the managers who have been borrowing Baxter's apartment, as kind of a quid pro quo, they give some glowing recommendations of Baxter to the higher levels at the company, and that brings Baxter to the attention of Jeff Sheldrake, who's played by Fred McMurray. Sheldrake is an upper level executive. He works in personnel. He brings Baxter up to his apartment and kind of does this song and dance about how, he's learned about this whole deal with the apartment, and he's really disturbed about how there's these bad apples at the company who are corrupting their morals. And then as soon as Baxter gets really uncomfortable and promises never to lend the key again, Sheldrake is like, oh, but actually, I want the key. So Baxter, of course, is like, yeah, sure, I'd love to have this upper level executive on my side. So Sheldrake uh, gives Baxter 2 tickets for this musical in exchange for the key. And he's gonna bring his mistress there for the night. Baxter is overjoyed, and so he goes to Fran again, who's this elevator operator that he's got a big crush on, and he invites her to go with him. So she's kind of charmed by him, but she's also not quite sure. She says she has to meet up with a former boyfriend that night, but she agrees to go out with him after that. But then when the film follows her to her meeting with the former boyfriend, that former boyfriend turns out to be Sheldrake. So the two of them had this affair over the summer while Sheldrake's wife and children were out of the city. Sheldrake tells her that he's still crazy about Fran and he plans to divorce his wife. And Fran is a bit taken aback by this. She kind of knows that it's a bad idea to be getting involved with a married man, but she does genuinely love Sheldrake against her will. And so she agrees to resume their relationship on the understanding that he actually is going to get a divorce from his wife. And she ends up standing Baxter up because of it. So, thoughts on this scene?
Let me just say that I feel like so this is our first episode that we've done where we kind of have differing opinions on the
Mm-hmm.
movie. So, but I think because I don't passionately hate this movie, I'm just kind of lukewarm on
I'm
it.
glad to hear it.
I'd like it. Like, I think that that's a good thing, but also a bad thing in terms of the podcast because I have a lot less to say because it's not like, oh, I hate this. Let's talk about it and rant about it for 10 minutes. It's just like, okay. So, all that being said, I feel like I have two things to say, and they're both very brief. And then I'll let Geneva take over, I guess. Um, but one of them is I really need to start calling people Buddy Boy because whoever that character is, and then he like spreads it around. He's the first one to call Baxter Buddy Boy, and then all of a sudden, all the executives start
Mhm.
calling him that. But every time they said it, it just made me laugh because it's such a 20th century thing to say. I
Yeah.
feel
Well, it is, but it's also so perfect, I think, because it's such a kind of faux camaraderie, oh yeah, we're just, equals, I'm friends with you, we're totally like in each other's corner. Hey, buddy boy, when in reality, this man is exploiting and manipulating and um, does not care at all for the workers that he's interacting with. So
I mean, it could even be seen as I don't even know your name. I'm just going to call you Buddy Boy
yeah, there
because
you
that's
go.
what I call people whose name I don't know.
Yep, there you go.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a very strategic reason as to why he calls him that, but I just think it's a funny a funny phrase. I mean, nowadays it probably would be I don't know, bro or something or
Probably.
buddy. People say buddy a lot now, just like my buddies blah blah blah. Um anyway, yeah, I just thought
If
that
he
that
was
was
Gatsby, he would call him Old Sport.
old sport. Yes. Um, which I'm pretty sure that's never been a phrase ever, other than in the Great Gatsby. Um, don't fact check me on that. I'm wrong. But anyway, so yeah, and then my second thought is I actually really think it's super cute how Baxter asks her out because it's the right level of persistence. It's not like, hey, you told me no and I'm just going to keep forcing myself on you even though you've said no. It's very much so a cute dynamic of I can tell that you're not fully opposed and you're kind of interested, so I'm going to keep pushing a little bit but in a cheeky sort of way that's really sweet and kind. And but also I'm kind of nervous and I don't know, and she's kind of super witty in how she's responding to what I'm saying. I just feel like the way that scene is written, it's I just think it's written really well, and I think that the way that they act it out and how they interact with each other, I just feel a vibe between the two of them. I feel like they have a lot of chemistry as actors and that comes across in the characters and it feels believable to me. But yeah, I just love the way that scene is written, how it's acted, and I think it's really sweet and it's really cute. And it makes me want to ride elevators more because who knows? You never know who you're going to bump into, right?
Which, speaking of which, I had this thought while watching, and this is completely not important at all. But I was like, what exactly is the purpose of an elevator girl in the context of this, where it's just about pushing buttons? But then it occurred to me the elevators in this huge building probably don't have any sort of, computer system to maximize efficiency. And so maybe there's some sort of training that goes into figuring out how to, get that number of people up and down at the appropriate time. So I was like, all right, I'll let it go. But it was kind of funny when you see her in there and all she's doing is pressing buttons with her little uniform.
I thought that was a pretty common thing at the time. Like if it's a high class place or something, but maybe I'm just thinking of hotels. But I feel like it was pretty normal.
It was, it was. I feel like, and don't quote me on this, I could be wrong. I think elevators, when they were first invented, were also a little bit more complicated. There were kind of levers involved. You had to be manually opening and closing the door. So it made more sense to me to have a person there to do that and make sure that people weren't, handling it wrong or getting caught in, you know, the cracks and things like that. This one seemed a little bit more automated,
Geneva,
but
have you ever tried to operate an elevator with buttons? It's really quite difficult.
Tatum goes to an elevator and she's like Buddy the Elf from Elf, and she
Yeah,
just presses every button.
presses
They'll
all
get
of
there
them.
at some point.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway,
So yeah,
Mhm.
I'll let you take over and give your comments because I'm sure you have much more to say than I do.
Well, I mean, we've got a lot of movie left, so we've got to pace ourselves. But I definitely could not agree with you more on how adorable the two of them are. And I think, you know, I was really struck, rewatching this movie about, again, like I said, how much of a master of tone I think Billy Wilder is. Because Jack Lemmon at this point in the movie, he's so kind of, this is a testament to Billy Wilder, but also to the performances of the actors. Because Jack Lemmon he's so happy-go-lucky. He's kind of neurotic. He's a little bit self-centered, but in kind of a charming way. He's kind of a very sort of comedic, energetic presence. And Shirley MacLaine is bringing this very different energy, where she's very cool, she's very self-possessed, she's very reserved, and you can see kind of hints peeking through where she's very charmed by him, but she's also very wary. You can get this sense even before you learn more about her backstory, that she's been
More
damaged.
about her backside. Okay. Whoa.
Freudian slip. Edit that out. Um, More about her.
There's no way I'm editing that out. There's no way.
um, Great. Now I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
More about her backstory, that has been damaged in the past, but you don't really get a whole lot of that yet. But you can also tell that she's very charmed by him, and that they have this potential to balance each other out really well. And so, yeah, and like you say, it's, he's very persistent. He's maybe a little bit too eager, but also in a very, very charming way. But then I was just so struck by the contrast between their scenes, which are much more comedic, and then the scene in which Fran goes to have dinner with Sheldrake. And the tone of that is just so different. It's so much more grounded. I think the two of them are fantastic in that scene where you can tell that there's, history there, that there's sort of genuine feeling and genuine pain. I think, Fran's sort of combination of, she really does love Sheldrake, but she knows that she shouldn't, and she knows it's a terrible idea and that it's going to end badly, but she can't help how she feels. And she wants to believe him, even though she knows that he's probably not on the level. It's very adult and grounded in this way that is so different from her interactions with Baxter. But I think because the tone of this movie is just so well balanced, those two things are able to exist next to each other. And over time, the movie kind of gradually moves from the more comedic to the more grounded, but it's still able to kind of bounce between the two and keep this balance. This movie, I was trying to think about how would you type the genre of this movie? Because in many ways it's a rom-com. It's kind of one of the great rom-coms of all time, but it's also very dramatic. It deals with very, very heavy themes and things that happen, which, by the way, I probably should have said at the top, but if anyone is not familiar with the plot of The Apartment, please do be aware that it deals with suicide and suicide attempts. And so, if that's something that is a sensitive spot for you, you may not want to listen to the plot summary of the second half of this movie, because that's something that will come up quite a bit. But yeah, this movie it gets very dark, but it's also able to balance that with a lot of lightness and keep it kind of from becoming too depressing.
I I find it to be interesting that you talk about genre because for me, I don't consider this movie to be a rom-com at all, which maybe in the grand zeitgeist of whatever, people think it's a rom-com and I'm the odd person out, but For me, maybe it's because I don't find a lot of it funny. I'm like, oh gosh, this is just blah. Like I don't think looking at stupid women is funny, or men being sleazebags is funny, or I mean, not that that's the only things that are portrayed as funny. There are some things that I thought were funny in this movie, but when I finished it, I would never consider this movie to be a rom-com at all. I would call it a drama that happens to have a romance in it, but I definitely would. I don't. To me, I don't take away rom-com at all.
Yeah, yeah. Like I mean, like I say, it's difficult to characterize because it's almost too light to call a drama, but it's definitely too heavy to call just a rom com without qualifying it, in my opinion. Anyway, also just random note, along with the apartment, that Chinese restaurant is just so the design is amazing. I really want to go there. Just looks like a great place to get a booth and celebrate New Year's incredibly depressing New Year's Eve.
So, for those who don't know, Geneva was just living in Scotland last year, doing her master's degree. And she would just go to pubs and sit and read. And Geneva is known to do this. She does it in Scotland. She does it in the US. She does it everywhere.
Guys,
So,
going to restaurants and pubs and bars by yourself and reading, it's great. I don't know why
if
more
anyone
people don't do
wants to
it.
have an understanding of Geneva's personality, that's it. Although, Geneva, have you done this? Have you done that at a Chinese restaurant? Maybe you need to add that to your
To
list.
my repertoire, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll take a look around, see what's out there.
the clock's ticking. I don't know what it's counting to, but it's ticking towards something.
All right, so moving on in the plot. Um, Sometime later, at the company's rowdy Christmas Eve party, very tipsy Baxter tells Fran that he has forgiven her for standing him up. However, when he sees Fran using a broken hand mirror that was left at his apartment, he realizes that she is the one who's been seeing Sheldrake. At the same party, runs into Sheldrake's secretary, Miss Olson, who tells her that Sheldrake has had flings with many other women in the office, including Miss Olson herself, and each time he promised to divorce his wife. Heartbroken, Fran meets up with Sheldrake at Baxter's apartment and confronts him. Sheldrake insists that no, 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 Fran is different. Then he gives her $100 to buy herself a Christmas present, and then he leaves to catch the train home and return to his family for the holiday. Baxter, meanwhile, gets extremely drunk at a bar, meets a similarly depressed woman, and takes her back to his apartment. When he gets there, however, he discovers that Fran has tried to kill herself by taking an overdose of sleeping pills. Baxter kicks out the woman and he goes to his next door neighbor, Dr. Dreyfus, to beg for help. The two of them manage to save Fran's life. Dr. Dreyfus assumes that Baxter is the cause of her suicide attempt, and Baxter, who is anxious to protect both her and Sheldrake's reputations, acts like, he's just a kind of a careless philanderer. Dreyfus is very disapproving, and he urges Baxter to be a mensch. All right. So yeah, this is kind of the turning point in the movie to me, where previously we'd see Baxter in his sort of brown nosing, kind of laugh along with the executives, like they would talk about how they have their can't keep got to keep my wife from finding out about my mistress. So I picked up this woman and she's drunk and we're going to go have a good time. And he's kind of like, oh, yeah, yeah, gotta, what it is, it is. But this is the point where he comes home and he realizes that all of these things have an actual cost and that there's a very real person who he cares about, and he sees her vulnerability and he sees that the that attitude is something that is just extremely damaging. And the use of the neighbors in Baxter's neighbors in this movie, I was really struck by on this rewatch. Just the contrast between their attitudes toward the way Baxter lives his life and his goals and his the attitude that he has. Every time he tries to sort of imitate something that his one of the executives that he knows has said, or the way that they act, they're just horrified. They're just like, what are you talking about? That's the worst thing I've ever heard. You shouldn't treat people like that. But at the same time, they're very caring of Baxter. They're very sort of protective of him in a weird way. They kind of, they ask about his life. They interact with him, lend him things. Dreyfus obviously is there, and he gets involved when there's an issue, and he checks up on them. There's just I feel like there's a real humanity and kind of sense of community in his apartment building among his neighbors that is not present in the company that he works at. Yeah, sorry, I was like pausing to see if you had any thoughts on that, because I was like, wait, what do I want to talk about next?
Yeah, I mean, I have things to talk about, but nothing in relation to that comment. So I didn't want to jump in and be like, so here's a different thing that I want to say.
Gotcha. Well, if you had a note or anything from this section, feel free.
Yeah, so I had a few other different thoughts about this section that I can dive into, but one of them is okay, first of all, is this a Christmas movie? because
Okay, thank you.
because I feel like there's so many people that make that argument that Die Hard is a Christmas movie just because it takes place at Christmas time. And I'm not saying whether or not I agree with that, but I'm saying if the fact that a movie takes place at Christmas time means that it's a Christmas movie, is The Apartment therefore a Christmas movie?
The
So
apartment, I'm so glad you said that, because that was definitely on my list of things to talk about. And I had not realized this until this rewatch. And it definitely joins my list of favorite genre of Christmas movies, which is a kind of rom-com adjacent, but also secretly very melancholy and about lonely people trying to reach out to other people around the holidays movies that are set around Christmas, which is The Shop Around the Corner and While You Were Sleeping. They're all kind of in that same genre, and it's such a good genre, such a good underrated type of Christmas movie.
so Geneva, you are going on the record saying that The Apartment is a Christmas movie?
I would, yes, The Apartment is a Christmas movie. You do not have to watch The Apartment only around Christmas, but
Only at Christmas can you watch this movie.
some could definitely be seen, viewed productively within the context of Christmas.
Right. Yeah. So, in the same kind of subject line as the Christmas party, I just felt like I had to mention there's some really awkward old school kissing going on at this Christmas party. you know, that, I mean, there's literally a scene where I think Baxter, maybe it's not Baxter, but someone's like, no, it is Baxter. He's in an office, then he's walking around the corner, and it's a pretty long take. And there's literally two people leaning against the glass wall, like holding their faces in the same position, maybe slightly moving their faces every 2 seconds, but they're just holding there for, gosh, I don't know, 20 plus seconds. I mean, it felt like it was forever. I
But
was
you're
just
telling me
thinking,
your makeout style?
no. Is it anyone's? I don't think it's anyone's makeout style anywhere. But I was just thinking about just being a background actor who's being paid very little money because you have no lines and you're just told, yeah, so you're going to stand there and just hold your face against someone else's face until I call cut. No, 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 don't move. Don't move. Just hold it there. And then there was another awkward kiss too. I think when he came down and he was like exiting the elevator or something. I don't know, but they were just so awkward that I had to say something about it. It was pretty extreme. So yeah, it definitely made me uncomfortable. But yeah.
It's made me think of made me really want to rewatch Mad Men. Remember Mad Men's insane office Christmas parties?
Yes, they had some good ones.
They really did.
But no awkward kissing. They had lots of other awkward moments, but not awkward kissing. Speaking of Mad Men, this is a super meta thing and it's probably not real, but is Peggy Olson in Mad Men like a reference to Miss Olson in this movie who's a secretary? I don't know.
I know.
Probably not.
Could
But
be.
I feel like,
secretary who sleeps with, well, I mean, Peggy never sleeps with the boss, but she definitely sleeps with Pete from the
well,
office. So,
I mean, he's technically a boss, but in terms of his job, not in terms of his character. He's definitely not a boss in terms of his
yeah.
character at all. But yeah, I just thought that I feel like I forget the name of the creator of Mad Men, but I feel like he has definitely seen the movie The Apartment. So I just was thinking, oh, that'd be kind of cool if he named Peggy after this character. But yeah. And then okay, so I have two more thoughts. One is I really appreciate how realistically long it takes to revive Fran,
Mm.
because I feel like there are other movies where it would just be like, hey, let's have her drink a glass of water, or the doctor just comes in and slaps her face and then she's healed in 5 seconds. This was something where it was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It was kind of gory of them like
Mm.
you see Dr. Dreyfus walking in with this stomach pump and then you hear her vomiting and then he's pretty violently slapping her awake,
Hmm.
all these things. And so I really appreciated that they were willing to take the time to show. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how realistic this is, how they're reviving her, but just the fact that it takes a long time, I don't know, I just think it's very I think it's very smart. And I think that it just gives you a taste of kind of the gravity of the situation of how unwell she actually was. Like she was past the point of no return and they had to do all of these extremes in order to get her back to normal. So yeah, I appreciated that. And I feel like as a director or a writer, you have to be, I don't know, it takes a lot of patience and a lot of self-control to write a scene like that is that slow. It didn't feel slow, but just the process of her being revived was slow. So
Hmm.
yeah. And then I guess kind of related to that, my favorite character in this movie is Dr. Dreyfus, by the way. I think he's fantastic. I think he's a dose of realism in the whole thing. He's kind of the one who keeps everything grounded, and he's also really smart and funny and loving. Even it's tough love, but he's a super loving guy who I feel like genuinely cares. And there aren't a lot of people in this movie who genuinely care about anyone else. So he was refreshing and quite funny and sweet.
Hmm. Yeah, and his wife is as well. I mean, we will. She hasn't shown up yet, but she will show up shortly. They've clearly two of probably the best possible people for Baxter to have as neighbors in terms of contact with how you should be acting toward other people.
Can you imagine what their conversations are like at home? Because he's like shouting up the stairs every like Baxter's every move, or people who he thinks are Baxter. So he's probably like another one, and then they go upstairs and have this really long gossipy conversation, just spilling all the tea. Although it's probably not even. I mean, it's not real tea because they don't know what's actually going on. But I feel like they probably just have lots of conversations where I don't know. I just think Baxter is probably one of their main sources of entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what else? Can you imagine how thin the walls in that apartment building probably are? I'm sure everyone in that apartment
No.
building hates him. All they can hear.
Ugh, we've all been there, right?
Oh boy. um, Miss Olsen, you mentioned Miss Olsen. I find her a really interesting character. The way that she is sort of Fran from the past, but has kind of chosen a different, or has processed the experience of being used and discarded by Sheldrake very differently, where it has kind of hardened her. And I don't say that necessarily in a judgmental way. I actually kind of um, I kind of like her in this movie in certain ways. I certainly like the fact that she, spoiler alert, after she gets fired, is goes kind of torched earth and is like, well, I'm finally going to tell his wife what a horrible person he is. But there is also a kind of heartlessness to the way that she tells Fran and just kind of spills to her everything that Sheldrake has done and just destroys all of her illusions in one go. And I think she, you know, she's doing it because she's drunk and jealous. But I think in a way too, she also thinks that she's doing a doing Fran a favor, which to a certain degree she is. I mean, she is telling her the truth, but she is also doing it in this very intentionally hurtful way. But yeah, I find her very interesting. The fact that she would be willing to continue as Sheldrake's secretary for so long. I think they said it was 4 years that they had been broken up, and yet she continues to work for him and do his bidding, even though she clearly has this sort of unresolved feelings toward him.
I didn't read her character that way at all.
Oh, interesting. How did you read her?
No, I thought that she was kind of, I felt that it was a female camaraderie thing of, we're kind of sisters bonded by trauma. We've both fallen in love with this man and he has betrayed us, but you don't know it yet. So I feel like out of solidarity, I need to tell you what's going on. It didn't seem like she was saying anything to hurt her. But maybe that's just the way that I read it. Because again, I'm very sensitive to women being portrayed in certain ways. And so I feel like for me watching this movie, so many of the women are just portrayed negatively that I was looking for a woman to be doing something genuine and real. And so for me, I read it as she's been hurt and she wants to let Fran know what's going on too before it's too late. So yeah, I find it interesting that you say that. And also the same thing at the end when she goes to Sheldrake's wife. I just feel like it's a solidarity thing, and I don't know, it's the last straw. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, and she just realized the fact that I'm not speaking up is causing a perpetual problem. And if you think about, you might think, why did she stick around for 4 years? I mean, it's similar to the dynamic of was things that we see today, of I'm working for a super powerful person. I don't want to speak up because if I do, I don't know what's going to happen. And especially as a woman in the 1960s, I can't imagine there were as many jobs available. So it could be like, if I leave this place, I don't know where I might end up. I need to provide for myself. And so I'm just going to kind of lie low, keep this job and act like I'm fine, even though I'm not, because this man did this, but he's powerful. And I don't know. Maybe I'm reading way too much into this, but for me, I don't know. I didn't see her character as being I don't know the word I'm looking for, but she didn't seem scheming to me. She just seemed like a complex character who has been through a lot, and finally something snaps, and she's like, no, I'm going to support the women who are also affected by this piece of shit man, in my opinion. So
Not
yeah,
an opinion,
I don't know. Maybe
it's
that
an
is me.
absolute unvarnished truth.
Yeah, and maybe that's me reading too much into it, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I think I don't disagree with you. I think that's a valid reading. I think for me, it's a bit of both. I think she is doing this out of solidarity with, I know where you've been, Fran, and I know how sort of starry-eyed and how willing to kind of ignore the red flags you can be because he is so charming. And it does feel so good at the beginning, and he does make it so easy to believe him when he says he's going to divorce his wife. But I think there is also, just in the way the actress plays it, I think there's also jealousy. I think she could have done it in a different way. I don't think she necessarily had to wait until she was drunk at an office party to spill the beans. I think I think it's both, that it's partly out of concern for the other women he hurts, but it's also in part her own hurt feelings and sense of kind of just jealousy and vindictiveness toward Sheldrake, 100% justified vindictiveness toward Sheldrake, who is a piece of shit.
Yes, he sucks. Let me just say one quick thing before we move on. I know that this is preachy, but I just feel like I need to say it. If someone is drunk, man or woman, don't take advantage of them. That's not consensual. People cannot say yes or no when they are incapacitated and inebriated. So just need to throw that out there because we see a lot of men in this movie having, in my opinion, non-consensual sex with very drunk women. So not that it's always women, it can be men too, but just throwing that out there.
There's also a lot of drunk people having, like, mutually drunk people having terrible drunk sex. That is a bad idea and is not good. But yes, in particular, I mean, this entire movie is about the way that, men in positions of power seduce and prey on women, and use the wealth that they have, the sort of social influence that they have, um, to take what they want. It's it's that sort of exploitation of power that they hold over, Baxter, our point of view character. Baxter is being used and manipulated by these people to get what they want, and Baxter is fine with it as long as that he feels like he can also get what he wants out of this situation. But then as the movie goes on, he starts to realize, the true awfulness of the system that he's participating in. And yeah, anyway.
Yeah, and just to kind of circle back to something that I've already said several times, but just to reiterate, this movie is difficult for me to watch because not only are the men portrayed in that light, but it also, there's so many women here where it just, I don't know, I feel like it plays into this stereotype that women are naive enough or emotional enough to fall for it. And that just really bothers me that these women all around them are, they don't recognize that these men are terrible until after they've already gotten emotionally involved and blah, blah, blah. Because women don't operate with their heads, they operate with their hearts and their emotions, and they jump in and they fall in love. And the men are just using them for sex and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. There's just a lot of stereotypes in here that I don't like. And I feel like we even see them today in our society of, oh, men watch these things. And so they assume this is how I'm going to behave because this is what's normal for men. And then women watch these things and then they think, oh, well, this is how women are, and vice versa. Men think those things about women and women think those things about men. And it just creates a lot of, I don't know, just toxic relationships between men and women and men in themselves and women in themselves and both of them in society. And I don't know. I don't like those stereotypes being perpetuated, no matter how good the story is. So I don't know. Like this movie is just difficult for me. Again, I don't hate it. It's just, I don't like, it's not like, it's, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm curious. What's your interpretation of the relationship, the very gross relationship between, I don't know their names, but that one manager and his mistress, who's the telephone operator? Because my interpretation of her, I don't know that he ever mentions sort of stringing her along by promising a relationship. For me, it seemed like it was more she's with him because he has money and so she can get what she wants, which is just a wealthy boyfriend to take her out to restaurants and show her a good time, type of thing. Like, I don't know that, I don't know, it is exploitative, because he is in a position of power and she's lower in the, at the company. But there is also that sense of, I think she's also getting something that she wants out of it, which is, someone with a bit more money to buy her gifts and take her out places, things like that. I don't know. I'm just curious what you thought about that.
Gonna be honest, I don't remember that.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, because I was also very, the woman that Baxter, well, Baxter doesn't pick up at the bar. She sort of picks him up, or maybe they mutually pick. Yeah, I think she more is more the initiator of it. But yeah, there's that super drunk woman when he's also drunk at the bar, who's married but also perfectly happy to take a man home or go to a man's home. It's sort of
I mean,
two.
all the people in this movie are just terrible.
Oh, they really are.
They're just all terrible people, every single one of them.
Making
It's not
terrible
really,
choices.
which is why, like, categorizing it as romantic comedy, I'm like, I don't think this is funny. All these people suck. And yes, Fran and Baxter are slightly redeemed by the end, and Dr. Dreyfus is cool. But gosh, I just hate all of these people.
Yeah, I think we have just a very different senses of humor. Because for me, I think Baxter in particular, I mean, I just find Jack Lemon's performance to be very funny at times. When he's intentionally being comedic, not when he's being dramatic, because those scenes are not funny. But just the way that
And
he
to me,
interacts.
he's a pushover. Like,
Well,
ugh.
yeah, and it's funny, kind of
I
seeing
don't
that
think it's funny.
that sort of painful relatability. I think about it, and it's a very pointed satire at parts, and it is very cynical in certain way. So it's not funny in a sort of light-hearted escapist sense. It's more funny in these are uncomfortable truths about the world, and we're sort of revealing them in a way that's a little bit over the top and is a little bit is very pointed, but we're also making it okay to laugh about, to kind of make fun of how terrible and ridiculous these things are, that sort of thing.
I disagree, but that's okay.
That's okay. And I'm not saying, to be clear, I when I use the term rom-com, that doesn't mean that the movie itself is a comedy in a like, it's not a Monty Python type comedy. There are funny parts, to it, but it is still very much a drama in many aspects. Anyway, all that aside. Fran spends a few days recuperating in Baxter's apartment, and the two slowly grow closer. Baxter, anxious to cheer her up and prevent her from attempting suicide again, suggests a game of gin rummy. While they play, Fran laments that she's always attracted to bad men before she falls asleep. Later, Baxter also tells her that he once tried to shoot himself over a woman, but he only ended up shooting himself in the knee. Baxter also calls Sheldrake and tries to get him to visit, but Sheldrake, wary of letting his family know what is going on, will only talk to her over the phone. Eventually, Fran's brother-in-law arrives looking for Fran, and learning that she attempted suicide, he assumes that Baxter was the cause, and he punches him. Fran kisses Baxter on the forehead and leaves. So this part of the movie, I always forget kind of how relatively short it is, but yeah, it's very sweet. The way that the two of them interact, the way that they, his sort of anxiousness about how to deal with her is this really great indication of how much he's growing. He's very selfless in this part of the movie. He never really tries to, at least in my opinion, he clearly likes her, but he's not trying to make a move on her. He's um, encouraging her to do things or not do things, but my at least how I read it is it's generally because he thinks that this is what she wants, or he thinks that this is what's best for her in terms of, trying to keep the news about what happened quiet so she doesn't have to deal with a lot of intrusive eyes. He thinks encourages Sheldrake to talk to her, hoping that that will help, which of course it doesn't really, because Sheldrake is incapable of saying anything that's comforting. But like Baxter doesn't do everything perfectly, but he really does try. And in particular, just the scene where he goes through his medicine cabinet and is removing all the razors and just kind of generally looking around and trying to make sure that everything is safe. Yeah, it's very very dark but also very sweet in a way. Like I don't know how to really talk about something that's that dark. But yeah, he really does care about her in a way.
Something that I wanted to just talk about, I guess, briefly, was there were two lines in this. Well, so first of all, this is kind of the turning point in the movie when I actually started to enjoy it and I wasn't bored, because this is when we really start to dive into the relationship between Baxter and Fran, which I find is very easy to get drawn into. But there were two lines in the scene when he's kind of sitting by her bedside as she wakes up and everything, and they're playing the card game. And the classic line that we have seen in so many different movies and also life situations is why can't I ever fall in love with someone nice like you? Automatic friend zone. It just it broke my heart to hear that. Yeah, it's another one of those moments where it's like we've all been there. So I felt that. That was like, oh, that's rough. And then also I loved his line at one point in that scene, and I think it comes up later. And I would like to start saying it in my everyday life, which is, well, that's the way it crumbles, cookie wise. I just think that that's a really cute line, and I like that a lot. And then the last comment I have for this sequence is it not a big deal that he's straining pasta through a tennis racket? Like, I don't understand why she walks in and she just says, "Oh, you're straining pasta." And he's like, "Yep." And then that's it. Just like, how is that not a big deal? That's just such a weird, it kind of confused me. It's a weird character choice, or just plot choice, I guess. And I feel like if that is something that were to happen in the real world, I feel like the other person would just automatically ask, "What are you doing? Why are you doing it that way?" That's
Well,
kind of weird.
well, they set it up earlier when she shows him the tennis
Oh, did
racket,
they?
and she's like, "Why is this in the kitchen?" He's like, "Oh, I use that to strain pasta," and she's like, "Oh, sure, naturally."
Oh, I missed that. Okay, that makes sense
Yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which, oh,
Okay.
Jack Lemmon just like terribly singing in Italian while straining pasta in the kitchen. It's so
Hey,
freaking adorable.
it wasn't that terrible. I thought it was
It's
sweet.
very sweet. It's like yeah, yeah, like, absolutely.
If
How can you
that's
not just fall in love with him right there?
if that's terrible opera singing, then lock me up because I don't sound anything like that when I try to sing opera, which is every day.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for that section.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm so glad you brought up cookie wise because I was meaning to say the use of wise, blank wise throughout this film is so funny to me. Billy Wilder, man, his scripts, they're so tight and the use of language is just so good. It's this sort of weird, jargony, corporatized language that the managers use, and then Baxter picks it up and just starts using it all the time. And then Fran starts picking it up and starts using it. And just the way it travels throughout the film is just, it's so charming. You know, every time that they use it to each other, or she uses it at the end on Sheldrake, and Sheldrake's like, "What are you talking about?" Um, yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love these scenes. The two of them just have such good chemistry. Well, I think I've actually said everything I need to say about this section, so I'm just going to move on.
Great. Love it. Let's move on. This is quality content right here. A
Quality.
plus.
Nothing but the best from the Your Pick Movie podcast. All right. Back at work, Sheldrake fires Miss Olson for telling Fran about his affairs, and so she tells Sheldrake's wife everything. Finally forced to face the prospect of divorce, Sheldrake reaffirms his plan to marry Fran. At the same time, as a thank you for taking care of Fran and for remaining discreet, he promotes Baxter to become his assistant. Baxter is at first excited about the position, but when he realizes that Sheldrake continues to expect him to loan at his apartment, Baxter decides to quit and to finally become a mensch. That night, at a New Year's Eve party, Sheldrake mentions that Baxter quit his job and refused to loan him the key to the apartment. Fran is overjoyed. She leaves the party and runs to Baxter's apartment. On the way up the stairs, she hears what sounds like a gunshot and she's horrified, but Baxter opens the door holding an open champagne bottle, perfectly fine. Inside, Fran discovers that Baxter has decided to move out of his apartment and to start over. They sit down to resume their game of gin rummy, and Fran says that she's left Sheldrake. Baxter tells Fran that he adores her, and she responds with the absolutely iconic final line, "Shut up and deal." Ah, um, yeah, this ending is just, it's so good. It's so good. Their chemistry is so good. The look on Shirley MacLaine's face when Sheldrake tells her that Baxter quit his job and refused to give him the key to the apartment, the sort of just absolute joy that comes over her face when before she'd been sitting in this at this party, clearly miserable, clearly knowing that she's making the wrong choice, but kind of feeling trapped in where she is and unable to figure out how to dig herself out. And then all of a sudden, it's like this lifeline has been offered to her. And the scene of her running down the street and her kind of fur coat and her New Year's dress and her, New Year's garland kind of falling off of her, just so excited to get to him. I mean, this is, I think, why I call the movie a, why I think of this movie as at least related, at least an ancestor of the rom-com genre as we think about it, is because this is such a rom-com ending, and I say that as 100% a compliment and endorsement of it. This is what the stuff that a great rom-com is made out of. These two people that you really truly care about and have seen grow and change and rooting for finally getting together, and finally, there's a sense of hope and optimism about their pairing. And yeah, it's so joyful. And then, but then the ending line, how just kind of casual and unsentimental, but also sweet it is. He's giving her this whole speech about how much he adores her, and she's just like, no, shut up and deal. Like, let's just move on, and let's just, you know, start living our lives. Finally be together, finally start um, figuring out what's next for each of us. It's so perfect. Tatum, what are your thoughts on this ending?
Yeah, so this last section, again, I don't really have too much to say. I highlighted two quotes though. One of them is, I don't remember at what point this happens, but there's one point where the doctor is in Baxter's apartment again, and he just says, it's like my favorite line that he says, because he says it multiple times, but just, let me get my bag. Because he's like, oh, I gotta go get my doctor's bag. I'll be right back. And I just think that's funny how his line is always just, let me get my bag. And then there's also another conversation. I think it's when Baxter's talking to, I don't know if he's talking to Sheldrake. I think he's talking to Sheldrake, and Sheldrake goes, you dig? And to me, that just feels like such a 1980s, early 1990s thing to say in like an urban type.
Really?
I don't know. I just, yeah, I just found it to be interesting that came out of Sheldrake's mouth. He's talking about this whole elaborate thing, then he just goes, "You dig?"
I think of it
And
as such a
then,
60s thing to say. That's so funny. Yeah.
oh yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, and then the last comment that I have is, as much as as much as Baxter and Fran's relationship I think is really cute, I also think that she needs to learn how to be single for a while, because it sounds like she's kind of been moving around and she always dates the wrong men and da 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 da. And I'm just like, girl, I think you need to figure out who you are without a man for a while. But, okay. So I don't know. And I'm sure at some point we'll kind of get into a little bit more about my relationship with rom-coms, because my thought is like, yes, it's romantic, and yes, it's the ending that we all want to see, but also, is this the healthiest decision for this person to be making? Probably not. I don't think so, especially if he's planning on moving. What are you going to do? I don't know. We don't necessarily know if he's moving out of the city. He could just be moving apartments. But still, in my mind, I'm just thinking, girl, you need to learn you just need to figure out who you are without being in a relationship, because as everyone knows, you can't get to know someone else in a real way until you really know yourself. So yeah, I know that's not the most romantic ending comment that people want to hear, but for me, that was my takeaway. I was like, girl, you need to tell him no. Like, feel like, hey, that's really sweet. Thank you for caring for me. I think it's best for me to like kind of figure out my shit first, and then, we'll circle back around to this later.
Wow. Thank you for pouring water all over the ending.
You're welcome, world.
Oh,
Just wait until we have to talk about an actual full-on rom-com. That's
oh
gonna
boy.
be a time.
I would say I
I'm
will
sure that will
convert
be
you, except
chosen.
I have no faith in my ability to do that. I don't think you're
Yeah,
possible for you to be converted.
yeah.
But they're
We've
great.
been friends long enough for you
To
to know
anyone
this.
listening, let no one convince you otherwise.
Exactly. If you love rom-coms, hey, I'm here for it. That's great. Love that story for you. I'm just not a fan. Let me
I
just say though,
Yes.
let me just say real quick. That being said, there are some romantic movies that I do like. So I don't want to say across
Right.
the board
Oh
I
yeah,
hate all romantic movies. There are some, and actually in a few episodes we'll be talking about one that I love.
Yeah,
And
you don't hate romance. You're just not a fan of the
no,
genre.
yeah. And at some point, we'll be talking about Bright Star, which
Oh, Bright Star.
love that movie so much.
So good. Um, one thing that I really love is I really love the scene where Baxter quits because there's something so low key about it. The way it's sort of staged is, in some movies there might be, Baxter realizes what's going on. He realizes that Sheldrake is never going to change and he will just have to continue to sit by and continue to be complicit in this. And so he'll give this rousing speech about, how terrible he is and kind of throw it all in Sheldrake's face. But he throws down the key, he walks out. We cut to his office next door where I think he maybe closes a book that's on his desk, and then he goes to the closet and starts getting out his hat and coat. And Sheldrake comes in. He's like, "Hey, you gave me the wrong key." And Sheldrake's like, or Baxter's like,
No, I didn't.
"No, I didn't. I gave you the right key because I quit." And then he just walks out. It's very it's very cool in the sense of being very decided and self-possessed. And for this character that, up till now has been such a pushover, he's just incapable of saying no. He's incapable of standing up for himself. He's sort of incapable of having his own kind of thoughts and opinions about things. He's constantly um, copying the speech patterns, the thought patterns, the attitudes, the just the lifestyle of the higher ups at his company who he idolizes. He wants to be them. Now he finally has learned how to be his own person. He's become a mensch, to quote Dr. Dreyfus. And it's just a great scene.
And that's the same journey I want for Fran. She needs to figure out who she is apart from other people. That's what Baxter did. Now Fran needs to do that.
Do you think that um, do you think that Baxter would be harmful to Fran in her journey to discovering who she is or becoming a better person? I don't get the sense that Fran is someone who has never been alone. I think she actually, when she talks about her backstory, she mentions that when she's been in the city for a few years, and it wasn't until, I don't think she was dating anyone until she started dating Sheldrake. So I don't think it's that she's never been alone. I think it's more that when she is in a relationship, she just tends to gravitate toward relationships with bad men. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I can't necessarily speak to the latter comment because that's all speculation. I guess we don't necessarily know how much she was in relationships before Sheldrake. I think there is an interpretation where you could say she was consistently in relationships, but then there's also an interpretation where you could say she wasn't. So I don't really know as far as that. As far as the first question, though, no, I don't think he would treat her poorly at all. I think that he would be in support of that. But, you know, I still think that it's important to learn how to be by yourself for a while. And even if you've had moments of singleness in the past, if you've been through a bunch of toxic relationships since then consistently, you probably should take some time as well. Instead of like this man that you were in love with who said he was going to leave his wife for you. That seems pretty serious. And then it ends and then immediately you start dating someone else. I don't know. But I don't know. It doesn't actually matter because these are just my thoughts and we don't know what happens after this movie. And who knows? Maybe they'd be fine, but I don't know. It doesn't ultimately matter is what I'm saying. The movie is what it is and it ends where it ends and they say what they say. So, you know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. This is really random, but in the scene where Miss Olsen gets fired by Sheldrake and she goes scorched earth and she tells Sheldrake's wife everything, which is such a power move. I really love her coat and hat. She has this adorable coat and hat that is like sort of cheetah print. Like the collar of the coat is cheetah print and the hat is cheetah print. I think it's, anyway. Sorry, I was just like slightly drooling over, over the clothing.
I'll
in
get
this
you a
movie.
faux fur one for your birthday.
Yes.
Then you can wear it all the time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Yeah. So that's pretty much it that I've got on the movie. Do you have any other random thoughts that you haven't talked about? Actually, one thing I don't think I've said yet is I watched this movie with captions on, as I watch most things, and I was just struck by how many pop culture references there were in the script. This is a movie that's very much kind of not could only take place, because you could remake this movie and have it be set in another time and place, but the script is very much, this was written and filmed in 1960. They, Baxter goes to see The Music Man, which was on Broadway at the time, and his neighbor makes a reference to beatniks, and there's just all these kind of new technologies that they're using at a very particular time. Yeah, it's just a very sort of a movie that's very much grounded and set in a very particular time and place, which I was very struck by. And actually, on a similar note, um, I found this one piece of trivia on IMDb that just kind of cracked me up. It's a little bit long, so I'm going to abridge it while I read it, but it reads, although this film continues to find new generations of viewers who love it, many of the objects seen are nearly obsolete in 2022. These include adding machines, typewriters, LP records, rotary dial telephones, desk pen sets, small screen analog televisions, switchboard and elevator operators, milk delivery, and a multitude of others. On the other hand, club sandwiches, cocktails, dive bars, frozen microwavable meals, insurance, infidelity, cheese crackers, TV remotes, and the love of classic movies continue to be staples of everyday life. And New York City will always be New York City. Just thought that was kind of funny. Again, just the locations, the production design, the look of the apartment. It is very, very New York City, very kind of located in a place that would have been familiar to a lot of people who are watching the movie at the time.
We got to get some good movies that are that are Chicago proud. I feel like there's movies that are, this is LA, this is New York, this is gosh, I don't even know what others, Miami or whatever. I feel like there aren't very many that are full of Chicago pride.
Yeah, not a whole lot out there. There are a few good ones, but not nearly as many. All right, so this movie, The Apartment, was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, and it won 5, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine were both nominated for Best Actor and Best Actress. It was also received very positively by critics, both at the time and to this day. Currently, it's listed on Metacritic as a 94. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's 93% fresh. There are not a whole lot of reviews out there from reviewers from back in 1960, but I did find one from Bosley Crowther, the famous critic from the New York Times, who reviewed a lot of movies of this time period. And I thought his characterization of the movie was very interesting. He writes in one section, Mr. Wilder has done more than write the film. His direction is ingenious and sure, sparkled by brilliant little touches and kept to a tight, sardonic line. In addition to Mr. Lemons, there's a splendid performance by Shirley MacLaine as the daffy girl who gets into a lot of trouble, and a good one by Fred MacMurray as the wicked boss. So
That's an interesting take.
Yeah. I definitely agree with him on the brilliance of Billy Wilder's direction and the tightness of the story. But I would not describe Shirley MacLaine's character as daffy at all. I think she's kind of the opposite of that. And Fred MacMurray, I mean, he is wicked, but I don't know. I feel like his characterization of it is kind of flattening the movie in a way, flattening a movie that actually has a lot of nuance and humanity to its characters. They're extremely flawed people, and some of them are really, really awful, but they're not one dimensional, at least to me. Roger Ebert, another great critic, wrote a review of this movie back in 2001. He gave it 4 out of 4 stars, and he wrote, one of the ways this is an adult picture and not a sitcom is the way it takes Baxter and Miss Kubelik so long to make the romantic leap. They aren't deluded fools, but jaded realists who have given up on love and are more motivated by paychecks. There's a wonderful, wicked delicacy in the way Wilder handles the final scene and finds the right tender, tough note in the last lines of the screenplay. So I really like that. I think it speaks well to the dynamics of the movie, where it is this sort of, the quest for love and the valuing of love and companionship and community versus the valuing of paychecks, of money, of status, of working your way up the ladder. I think it does a really great job of depicting the sort of lonely single life in, New York, but it could be any city really. Baxter doesn't seem to have any sort of family. There isn't a whole lot of community within his life. There aren't a whole lot of people who are depending on him or checking in with him. And so as a result, the only thing that he has to work for is just trying to work his way up the ladder, trying to make it, trying to get the life that, advertisements and the glamorous lifestyle of the people above him, promise that those things will make him happy. But they don't. And, his journey is discovering that sort of a warmer, maybe less glamorous, but more caring way of living life is ultimately much more fulfilling. And yeah, it's just very sort of gentle and humanistic in the ending, I think. I don't know. What are your thoughts on these?
My only thought is Roger Ebert sure has a way with words.
He really does, or did. Yes. R.I.P.
So Geneva, can I ask you, what was the part of this movie that really did it for you when you first saw it, or the second time you saw it? What scene or what moment really solidified it for you?
It's really hard to say, which I
I
feel
feel
like
like
is
you
my
say that every
response
week.
every week. I think it might be just a difference in the way that you and I process movies, where there are sometimes scenes that will stick out in my mind, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's more a movie is more the accumulation of many things, and it's really hard to pick something out. But I do feel like the image. There are two images that kind of get stuck in my brain a lot when I think about this movie. They're both of Fran. One is her lying on the bed in this really beautifully shot and composed scene where Baxter gets home in his apartment and he's gonna throw I think it's like a pair of gloves or something into the bedroom, and he opens the door really quickly, and it's the camera is looking at the bed and the door is in the foreground or in the background. And he's kind of very quickly opens the door, throws it in. This light shines in on Fran lying there, and then he closes the door again. And then his face changes, and he suddenly realizes that something is wrong. And I think that's sort of the way that her body is framed in that, as sort of this almost sacrificial lamb type of offering. This sort of there's something very kind of classically tragic about it. I think it's very beautiful and heartbreaking. And then the shot close to the end when Fran is sitting in the restaurant trying to have fun at the New Year's Eve party and failing, and she realizes that she loves Baxter, and her face just changes, and all of a sudden her looking so miserable goes to her looking so full of hope. I think that's just such beautiful acting and such a beautiful image. So yeah, is there anything in this movie that you would say that you were kind of particularly struck by or moved by?
No.
Dang.
I had to think about that one. Like I said, I'm very lukewarm on this film.
Mhm.
I'm very neutral about it. I don't have any strong feelings that are overwhelmingly negative or overwhelmingly positive. So I'm gonna go with the very neutral no.
All right. Well, I think I should have gone second, but that's all right. That's all right. Different tastes. So, Tatum, do you want to reveal what film we're going to be covering in the next episode?
Yeah. So this week, Geneva chose The Apartment. Next week, I have chosen for us to discuss Straight Out of Compton. It is a film that I really love, and unfortunately, a movie that not a lot of people that I know have seen, and I don't think Geneva's seen it either. So, should be a good discussion. Yet another time, we will be coming in, or I will be coming in not knowing what Geneva's reaction will be. So,
And I don't know what my
stay
reaction is going to
tuned,
be.
guys.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpicpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.
See you later.